Okay, so let's take out our pretty house one. Okay, the process is very similar to the ugly house one. Okay, very similar. And the only difference is your script is a little bit different. And the script that I'm giving you here is just a start to get the seller to say yes. But once the seller says yes, you want to negotiate with them. You want to negotiate with them for terms as much as possible. And if you can get them to to give you a good price for cash, that's fine. But if not, then try to get terms. And terms meaning, if they're willing to do owner financing, if they're willing to let you take over their payments, which is a subject to. Subject to stands for subject to existing financing. That's when the seller has a house and he or she have a loan on it, and when you buy it subject to, the seller deeds you the house, and then you make the mortgage payments on that loan on their behalf, and the loan stays under the seller's name. Okay, and so that's a subject to. Of course, there's risk for the sellers in doing that. Is because if you don't make the mortgage payments, it's the seller's credit that's being affected. So why would the seller agree to such a thing? It's because they have no other choice. They don't have enough equity to sell the house any other way. If they were to put it on the MLS and have a real estate agents to help them sell it, then they might end up having to pay money pay money at closing to close on the house. So they don't have another choice but to sell it that way. Now, if you were a buyer, if you're going to stay in the deal and you are a buyer, or if your buyer is a landlord that you can trust, then it's fine that you structure it as a subject to, and you assign it to your buyer as a subject to. However, if your buyer is an owner-occupant buyer, or if it's a landlord that you don't trust, then you're much better off to negotiate with the seller for either a contract for deed or a wraparound mortgage or a lease option, and then assign that to the buyer. The difference between a subject to and a wraparound mortgage. A wraparound mortgage is this. A wraparound mortgage is the seller owns the house, has a loan on it, and when the seller sells it to the buyer, he's going to deed the house to the buyer, and he's going to act as a bank. He's going to owner finance the house to the buyer. But his owner financing note is wrapped around his existing mortgage, so he doesn't have to pay it off. Okay? So that's what's called wraparound owner financing. And because the seller, he or she, is now acting as the bank, he holds that note. If the buyer defaults, he can foreclose on the house and get it back. Okay? On a subject to, the seller is not acting as a bank, so only the bank can foreclose on the house. Okay? Now, on a wraparound mortgage, if the buyer is paying the seller and the seller doesn't pay to their bank, and that house gets foreclosed on, the buyer loses out. Okay, and so there are risks that's either on the seller side or buyer side. Somebody is taking a chance on this. If you are the buyer, okay, if you personally or if your landlord's the buyer, always negotiate with the seller to let you pay directly to the bank and not pay to them. Okay, so that way you don't have to take chance of them not paying, taking your money and not paying to their bank. Okay, so is everybody clear on those two differences? Is the bank going to object to a wraparound mortgage? The bank has the right to, but not the obligation. And most of the time you do a wraparound, you don't even notify the bank. And you don't need to notify them. But even if you did notify them, the chance of them calling the loan due is going to be pretty small, pretty slim, especially in today's market. But I mean, even in a few years ago, I did a subject to where my seller called her bank and says, "Hey, I sold my house. This guy's taking it over. Here's all the paperwork." So she sent everything. There was 2 loans on the house. There was one with Chase and one with Bank One. And she sent the land trust, the power of attorney. She sent everything to them. And they're like, okay. That was the end of it. So, yeah. I mean, as long as it's being paid, they the last thing they want to do is foreclose on a performing note.
Okay, I just want to make sure I understand. So with the subject to and the what's the other one? Wraparound. You're taking deed in both situations from the seller, and in one case you're doing a private mortgage, in the other case you're doing a lease option?
No. In a subject to, you're just taking over the payment. So there's no lease option, there's no private mortgage. You're just taking over the payments.
Okay.
In a wraparound owner financing, the seller is now acting as your lender, loaning the money to you.
So you're doing the mortgage with a new mortgage with the seller.
You do a new mortgage with the seller, yes. But on that note, it says that it's wrap around this existing mortgage.
Okay.
And then lease option is something different, okay? Lease option, the seller doesn't deed you the house. The seller leases you the house with the option to buy the house at a later time, okay? And a contract for deed or a land contract, I hope this is not going to confuse you, but a contract for deed and land contract is very similar to a lease option, except for it says that the seller agrees to deed you the house once you finish paying for it. So you're not leasing the house. You're making your mortgage payment, but you don't get the deed until you finish paying. You guys understand the difference between those 4 things? Yes? Huh? Like a car note. Oh, perfect. Yeah, like a car note. Okay. Contract for deed, well, it's legal. It's contract for deed legal in Texas? The answer is yes, it's legal, but there's a lot of guidelines that you have to follow, and so most people just stay away from it completely. But the answer is yes, it is legal. And lease option is also legal in Texas. It's just you have to follow these strict guidelines in order for you to do it. Okay? So for those of you who are in Texas, how many of you guys are in Texas? Whoa, what happened? We just got more Texas today than yesterday? Yeah, Texas decided to show up today. For those of you in Texas, I teach a delay closing contract instead of lease option. What it is this. A lease option is that you have a lease and an option to buy the house. A delay closing contract is an actual contract to buy the house, but you delay the closing for 1 year. So instead of a 30-day closing, you're doing a 1-year closing. And you also do a lease on that house. You got it? So that's the difference. And so because you're doing a real contract, it's not an option anymore, a real contract, it doesn't fall under the lease option law.
One thing about the lease option is you're still a landlord, right? Where you're responsible for the maintenance.
He said that one thing about lease option is that you're still the landlord, that you're responsible. Well, it depends on how you're structuring it. If you're structuring a sandwich lease, meaning the seller does a lease option to you, and you do a lease option to your buyer, then it's called a sandwich lease. There's 2 leases, okay? Then yes, you are the buyer makes the payments to you, and then you make the payment to your seller. Then yes, you are responsible for whatever agreement you have with your seller. Now, what we're going to be talking about is assigning that lease option. So you have a lease option with the seller. You're going to assign it to this buyer for a fee, and then you out of the picture so they deal with each other. So no, you are not a landlord in that case.
Is there a time limit on lease options here in Texas?
Is there a time limit in lease option? The answer is no. It's just that depending on the time limit, the guidelines are different. Meaning, if it's within 6 months, then you can do whatever you want. If it's from 6 months to 3 years, then you have to follow a certain guideline. If it's 3 years or more, you have to follow another type of guideline. So yeah. It's most of the things that people say are illegal. They're really not illegal. It's just that there's guidelines you have to follow that most people are not going to follow, and it makes it illegal. But if you understand the law and understand those guidelines and work within those guidelines, then you'll be fine. Okay.